See what happens when I tell them I got food? There's still more coming. These are just the ones that were close. They come in and say, feed me. What's happened to my YouTube friends and family? Hope everyone's doing well. So I'm sitting at home until after Christmas. I got a little time off. I get 4 days off in a row anyways, and so I added a couple days that either they were going to write me a check or I can take them as PTO. Anyway, this video I've been trying to get out for a while now. Came out about a month ago. If you guys don't know who Hotshot Trucking with DD214 is, go check out his website. He puts on some good videos, talks about different topics, and even though he's a Hotshot channel, because that's what he does, a lot of my viewers are like trying to get into the box truck business. A lot of the same laws and rules apply. And so, and not just laws and rules, business sides of it, how you should look at things. I think he's a pretty good guy. I think his channel's informative and good. Anyway, in this particular case, he is interviewing a couple that started trucking a few months ago, earlier in the year. And they shut down their authority. They weren't able to make it, profitable and push through. And so they were nice enough to come on and be interviewed. And so my commentary on this video is not intended to beat up on or demean anyone. It takes courage to get on one of these videos, especially one that gets a lot of views. This one's up to 47,000 views now. And to get up there and admit why you failed, it takes a certain amount of courage. And so even though it's going to sound like, I'm beating up on their idea, their philosophy, whatever you want to call it, it's intended to help. And that's why they came on. And so if they ever watch this video, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way. This is the very thing or the very reason I make my videos, so you don't end up where they did. The gentleman on the right has the channel, and I mean no disrespect to him or his channel by my comments, because I don't agree with everything he says or doesn't say. There are some things I think were an issue and he didn't bring it up, and maybe he was just trying to be polite, because of course, if someone comes on and you're going to discuss how they failed, you don't really want to hammer on them the whole interview, and so maybe there's a little bit of that going on. Anyways, what I'm going to do is play it and kind of interject my comments, and the video itself is over a half hour long, so I'm probably going to break this up into a couple parts. They cover a lot of ground, a lot of things that people maybe don't understand, or reading it in a book, or seeing it on YouTube. Until you encounter it, you kind of don't know what it is. And so I'm hoping I can explain some of what they went through in hopes that you won't go through it as well. So here it goes. He's introducing them here.
Today, talk to you about what happened. So give us a little history, Travis and Teresa, about you and your background.
Well, her background is much more elite than mine. I was in the Marines for 9.5 years. I was air crew on C-130s, and then I had a secondary MOS, which was a maintenance controller, for 4 years. And then after that, I did a handful of nitnoid civilian jobs, mostly in logistics. And then
I was 22 years in the Air Force, retired as a major not because I got in trouble. I was enlisted first. I was a commander, deputy commander, and also in the maintenance group field. And then when I left the military, I did JROTC as a senior aerospace science instructor for 4 years before we took on this endeavor.
Awesome. So it's not like either one of you are uneducated. You both got a lot of history behind. So go ahead. Absolutely.
I was going to say, both of us have a very extensive logistics background.
Right. So, but what drew you to the hotshot industry?
Well, initially, I worked at a warehouse that we basically distributed Boeing aircraft parts. And one of our biggest moving parts was CH-47 helicopter blades, which if you've ever seen a CH-47, one of those blades can take up a large portion of a hotshot trailer. And so normally hotshots would come in and pick them up and take them. And there was more often than not times where we had the parts ready to go. The war fighter, sometimes it would be CONUS or in the United States, and sometimes it would be in Afghanistan. We'll be waiting on these parts because there was not enough trucks or hotshots to pick up the parts. And so I started thinking, I'm like, wow, that would be a really great, there's a huge demand for it. Locally at least, for the hotshot industry. And then we kicked that can around for 3 years, 4 years. And then finally, both of us just got to the point where like, you know what? We can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but unless we start doing something, it's never going to happen.
And that's true.
Okay. So sadly, from the very beginning is where it kind of went wrong. I made a lot of videos on Amazon, and a lot of you would say, "Hey, what does my city look like? How can I get into Amazon here in whatever city?" And people would ask me, "Is this market profitable?" And I would tell them, I can't tell you if your market's profitable because I don't know if that $3 a mile load you're trying to run is going uphill. I don't know what your fuel is like in that area. I don't know if the city where you're going to go drop this off, are you going to be able to get a return load, or are you coming back empty? And so even though the relay load board would show you what loads are in your area, at the end of the day, making a profit isn't just a component of the rate. And so you're only seeing half the picture. In the case of this gentleman, he worked at a place that had a problem shipping out their product. Now, that to him sounded like the hotshot industry must be on fire. There's a shortage of trucks. We can't get any. Throughout the video, they're going to mention they have a logistics background, but the very basic component to logistics is you need to understand your lane. And it seems to me like when they looked at this, I've seen the whole video now a few times, so I know they're in the Oklahoma area. And the very part of logistics that they miss is that particular market, the lane leading through there, is simply not a great place to be. And so when he says the parts would sit waiting for a hotshot, that's because most people don't want to take a load into that area because getting a load coming out is difficult. It's kind of like you see a load listed going to Colorado or the Pacific Northwest or Florida, and you really don't want to take it unless the rate pays well enough to get you in and out. And so I feel like what he interpreted as this must be, a great industry with a shortage of trucks, it was really people just didn't want to go there. That's what it boiled down to. And so I think they took an anecdotal problem or situation and tried to look at it like this is the whole industry. Now, he says they threw it around for 3 or 4 years. And so, if we turn back the clock 3 or 4 years, back in 2018, freight was good. Um, I don't like discussing politics on my channel because, opinions are like buttholes, right? We all have one, and the channel will go in all kinds of different directions real quick. But back in that era, Trump had put together some tax incentives and companies started spending money. They started buying inventory. They started buying new equipment. They started expanding. And this created a demand for trucks. And the rate wasn't great, but there was work. And so, he was looking at it at that point. Sadly, they started their business earlier this year. Honestly, they started up after I said, "Hey, I'm parking my trucks. I don't see the economy going somewhere good. I don't see, the price of trucks. They're going to drop," was my opinion. And if you look today, you'll see they have. And so I parked, and they started up after I said it's time to park them. And so I think their first mistake was that they looked at the industry as a whole through a peephole, and they thought the grass was greener than it was.
That's when we started. And we're both at the point where we just wanted to be the masters of our own schedule. And we thought that would be a good industry to get into to do that.
And we felt that our personal side of the house was taken care of. We have my retirement, both of our disability checks. His job was allowing him to be able to still keep his job and do it remotely. So no matter if we were on the road or not, we could keep that income. So we felt like our personal side of the house was protected, so we could take on this venture on the other side of our house, which would be the LLC, completely separate of our personal side.
And that's a great plan. So far, I don't see anything wrong with your plan.
Right.
Okay. So.
Okay. So, I don't know if he's being nice or if he really doesn't see anything wrong with the plan. And again, I don't know the man. I've seen a couple of his videos, and he seems to have a pretty good understanding of what he's doing. But here's issues I see. First of all, I already commented how they saw the market, and that's neither here nor there, guys, because we all have our own gut feeling on what the market really is. And sometimes you can think a market's not good, but then you get into it and you scratch and you find a niche, and there's stuff out there that's better than what you see on load boards. Understood. But the issue there is they said they wanted to be masters of their own schedule. First of all, the very term hotshot means the load is hot. It means, especially in real hotshotting where you're in the oil field or some sort of industry, you're not always looking for loads. Sometimes your phone rings at 2 a.m. and it's, how soon can you be here? And they don't even ask price. It's, get over here. And so trucking in general means you run when the market's hot. Right now, I know peak season isn't great this year, just from what I've been reading, but right now dry vans and box trucks should be running solid the rest of this week. This is your time to shine. Hot shots, flatbeds, heavy hauls, stuff like that. Those types of trucks are parked, at least most. But to say you're going to get into the hotshot industry or the trucking industry in general because you want to master or be the master of your schedule is just completely incorrect. In the trucking business, you run when there's work. And when the work stops, hopefully you made enough money that you can park your equipment, do some upgrades, do some minor maintenance, and so on. The other thing is they bring up that they still had money coming in to cover home builds. That's a thing of beauty. That's definitely a plus on their behalf. However, she says that he was going to be able to work from home and do his job while they were on the road. I see a big problem with that because anytime he spends working for somebody else, that is on duty time. And so if while you're out trying to do a run, when you should be in the sleeper sleeping, you're doing work, technically you're violating the FMCSA hours of service rules. And so I see a problem there too. A lot of people think they can do trucking, Hotshot in particular, as a hobby or a part-time gig. And that doesn't work.
Okay, so tell us what you did to prepare. Tell us to prepare to get into this business and take that step.
So the very first thing we did was we started an LLC, and we did a ton of research about the actual hotshot industry, all the stuff that we would need to be able to do runs, you know, your operating authority, your BOC3, everybody that has their hand
The clearinghouse.
in the money for this. And then of course I found your YouTube channel, yours, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to call,
Let's be fair. We watched a lot of YouTube channels, but yours was the most informative. And so we stuck with it. And I didn't mean to step on your toes, but the other part of it is Travis was also in the process of getting his logistics degree. So he kind of used that to our advantage and did all of his papers on this industry. So we kind of were already knee deep in the research of it through his degree.
Right.
And so I called expecting to get some random operator. And then when I called you and you picked up the phone, I was like, you know, I can't even believe that. And so we started talking, and then obviously you helped us, you mentored us a lot and prepared us for all the different unexpected aspects of it.
But you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
That's right. You don't know what you don't know.
That's probably the best statement in the whole video. You really don't know how much you don't know. The gentleman getting his degree in logistics is fine and dandy. I can tell you guys, when my trucking business was booming and everything was growing and growth was happening almost faster than it could be controlled, I had a few people approach me trying to come work for us. One had a degree in business. And after talking to the guy, I would not turn my business reins over to the individual. Basically, what happened is this gentleman went out and got a degree in business, and he wrote his papers on hotshotting, and they were reviewed by a professor that's probably never been behind the wheel of a truck. Now, that doesn't mean there's no credibility there, but at the end of the day, what this couple is missing is real nitty-gritty, hands-on how-to in this business. You know, the other thing is they come from a military background, and I'm not trying to knock people that, you know, serve this country, but the military is not a profit center. The military has the kind of budget where towards the end of the year, they look at each other and say, hey, we haven't spent all our money. And if we don't spend it, we're not getting this money back next year. And so back when I was in the equipment rental business, you'd be surprised how many last minute, mid-December sales would come, you know, falling in my lap because they needed to spend money. And so, you know, my point here is I don't think they ever had that I need to do this or nobody else is going to do it for me to cover the bills. And that gut instinct only comes from doing it, living it, and at the end of the month looking at your bank account and saying, holy cow, I'm short. And I think when they jumped into this, they really hadn't seen hardly any of the business in real life. They read about it, they saw it on YouTube. Apparently he studied it in books. But it's a different game. And their statement, you don't know what you don't know, that's probably the best takeaway you can take from this video. You don't know what you don't know.
Well, I don't know whether that's good or bad. Now that you're out of the business, it doesn't sound like I did a very good job at this point. So we're going to have to.
That has nothing to do with you. The industry is not.
Brian, you don't control the industry, man.
You sure don't.
All right. So you did your research. You contact me. CDL. You went and got your CDL, and so did she, right? Both of you.
Yep. We went through together, same class.
Yep. Now, once you got your CDL, you get your equipment. Did you purchase your equipment outright, or did you finance it?
No, we financed it. We put it on the business.
Okay. Now, what kind of equipment did you purchase?
So our truck was a 2017 International 4400 sport chassis.
The reason we went with that is because we knew the equipment that we had to get from IT, and we already had, and how much space that was going to take up. And the sport chassis that we found had all these extra cargo compartments on the bed. And it was, for us, ideal. Like, we thought, for me, being an organizational freak, I really like the idea of being able to haul with it and have all that stuff in its spot. Like, I'd be like, container 3 or cabinet 3 had this, and this. And, cabinet 2 had this, and this. And we were able to inventory. I was big on being with my maintenance background. Inventory was huge. I wanted to know everything had its place. So that was attractive to me. Hindsight being 2020, maybe that shouldn't have been our driver, but.
Well, another plus of that truck was its gross combined weight rating was 66,000 pounds, which our trailer would never be able to pull. So we let all of the securement equipment, we let the truck carry that weight instead of putting it on the trailer and let the trailer carry that weight.
Exactly. And then that really, when we thought about gas mileage, we thought if we have a truck that can pull what our trailer can pull, that would save us on gas mileage, which it did. We never did go, our gas mileage was as if we were empty.
Right.
Like we weren't pulling anything for the most part.
For the most part. The only time where it really bit into us is when we were carrying upwards of 16,000 pounds on the trailer.
But it really wasn't that big of a dent either.
No, it wasn't. We were still getting.
It was negligible.
How did the truck affect your insurance costs?
It wasn't. So I expected it to be a lot worse than it was because it was a medium duty truck. It's essentially a small semi. Excuse me. It was under $1,000 a month. So, and I expected to be around $1,500 or $2,000 a month for insurance.
When we did our first initial mock-up on what our finances would be, we were sitting a lot higher.
Okay.
We weren't.
So here kind of lies another issue. I don't believe the company Sport Chassis uses the Freightliner body. And this again kind of goes back to, do you know the trucking industry or not? An International 4400, I don't believe was ever used by Sport Chassis. They do Freightliners, they do Fords. Sport Chassis is actually a company. And so that company, when they build a sport chassis, they configure it a couple different ways depending on what your needs are. And so what this truck probably is, someone went and ordered the truck from the factory as a crew cab with, what they wanted on it, and then they took it to someone else and put a bed on it. Now, the problem with people that have never been in trucking before, when you look at a piece of equipment like this, you need to really understand what you're looking at. You need to dissect the VIN number. By that I mean, you take the VIN off of that truck, you go down to an international dealership and you have them verify for you which engine it has, at least from the factory. So that particular body probably had 3 different engine options, maybe even 4. And each one of those engine options probably had 4 or 5 different horsepower settings. There was probably 5 different transmissions that could have been attached to that. And then gear ratios, this is where it really kills you. Gear ratios are all over the planet. You could get anything from, a 330 gear ratio all the way down to a 530 gear ratio. And, excuse me, that greatly affects your fuel efficiency. Now, if it's a 4400 and he has a 60,000 pound combined gross vehicle weight rating, and so if they state that even with a load on it, they did not see a difference in fuel mileage, they never state what the fuel mileage was, for starters. So they don't know what the fuel mileage is, and they didn't say how much fuel mileage is. And then we don't know, because they don't discuss the truck itself, how was the truck spec'd. So for all we know, they've got a small engine running really high RPM, and they don't feel the difference in the load because the engine is revving out and it's killing them. Now, if you compare that to, let's say, going down to the dealership and buying yourself, any of the 3 automakers, Ford, GM, or Ram, if you line up 20 different Fords and they range anywhere from an F250 to an F550, they're all going to have the same V8 6.7 turbocharged diesel power stroke. And they're all going to have the same torque shift transmission. What's going to be different will be the wheels, the tires, the axles, the axle rating, and the gear ratios. But typically, with most of these vehicles, you might have 2 or 3 gear ratio options. And so it's kind of hard to get that part too wrong. But with the part of this international they had, they might have gotten some farmer's truck where they use it to drag hay trailers out of the ranch. And then on occasion, they hook up an RV and they go camping. And so since they only go camping 2-3 times a year, they can afford horrible fuel mileage because the primary use of the vehicle is something else. Versus had they gotten a true sport chassis, most likely this true sport chassis would have had higher gear ratios because it was designed as an over-the-road vehicle. And so that could also be, a huge mistake when you try and buy something you don't understand.
So we get a business umbrella, which was one thing that we were very shocked at.
Yeah.
We had a personal umbrella, and we still have that just to protect our own stuff. But a business umbrella was nearly impossible to find.
So you're saying the insurance on your Class A and trailer, the $1 million and the 100,000 was under $1,000 a month?
Correct.
Yes.
That's cheap.
Yep.
Yeah, we were happy.
We also, to be fair, we also have very good driving records. We're not crazy. Right. So that helped a lot.
One thing I come to learn is where you're at in the country as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a more rural area, the insurance is going to be a lot cheaper than like me sitting outside of Charlotte.
Right.
It's So that has a big effect on it. I didn't know that before. Okay.
Okay, so the issue with your insurance, and this is kind of a hack. If you get yourself a good agent, this is something you can learn from them. It doesn't matter so much where your home address is. So if that's what you're using for your information that you put on your MCS 150, basically where your office is, what they base your rate on is what zip code you garage your equipment in. And so if you live in, let's just say, Los Angeles, California, and insurance claims in that area are high, just due to high traffic, whatever, if you can claim you park the vehicle or garage it, is the term they use, someplace a little bit more rural, someplace that's cheaper, even if you use, your second cousin's little ranch out in the middle of nowhere, odds are the rate of claims aren't as high, and you will see a difference in your insurance premium, and it could be a substantial one. And so that's something to consider. The host here is saying that, being in Charlotte versus being someplace more rural, being more rural helps simply because there's less accidents out in the middle of nowhere. And so they base it kind of on zip code. But if you get yourself a good agent, they can kind of explain that and even kind of tell you, look, this area is really cheap. I quoted someone, a couple months ago, and I couldn't believe how cheap it was. If you can find an address over there where you can say that's where you parked your vehicle, I mean, let's face it, if you're going to get a Hotshot or a truck to go over the road, your vehicle's only going to be home, a couple nights a week on the high side, maybe 4 days out of the month, because in theory the truck should be running. And so if you park it at your house and it's not technically your garaging area, it's not going to be there often enough for anybody to notice or even care. 9 times out of 10, when you stop the truck, it's at a truck stop, 700 miles from home anyway.
And so you get your truck, you get your trailer. When you got out on the road, how long were you able to stay at a time?
So we both come from divorced. We're married.
We're blended.
We're blended. We don't have kids together. We have 4 kids total. Mm-hmm. And so her ex lives about 6 miles down the road. And so they spend a week here with us and a week there with him. And it works out great. If you want to talk about how to co-parent your kids, we can do another video. Anyways, I said that to say this. So on the weeks that they weren't here, we would go out on the road. So typically anywhere from 5 to 7 days, we would try and stay out on the road.
Okay.
So it's really week on, week off.
Now, I will tell you, that is the first red flag I've seen thus far. And I'll tell you why. I tried to find my niche where it would work for me. And I went out 5 days and it wasn't enough. It just wasn't. By the time you got out, you had to turn around and go home. And it's easy to get out. You can get out. But when you got to pinpoint that thing home, you're going from a shotgun blast to a sniper round.
That's exactly right.
Right. So you end up doing a lot of deadheading, trying to do a week on, week off.
Really
Go ahead.
Our deadheading wasn't terrible,
it
but
wasn't
of course.
Terrible.
Okay.
I mean, the worst.
Ohio was our safety, right? Our safety place. It was always, if we get back to Ohio, we can always get something out.
That's right.
Got you.
Our furthest deadhead was from Long Island to Ohio, and then from Fort Worth to here.
Got you.
All right, so anyone that's watched my videos, especially the ones I was putting up when I was over the road, during the course of the videos, I would explain, hey, I'm in Michigan, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm in Georgia, I'm in whatever. The reality of trucking, unless you have a contact, or dare I say a contract, where, a company that's relatively close to your home gets you loads that are round trip, or you've managed to find loads that do that, most markets cannot support you being home every night, every other night, or even once a week. It's very difficult. And so in my case, living in Southern California, last year when the market was better, we would get as much as $14,000, one pick, 3 drops coming out of Southern California. And what I would do is I'd get over there and get myself loaded on a Friday and be at my first delivery somewhere in the Midwest. Ohio's definitely a good place for freight, but Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, any of those areas are good for freight. And like he states, he's absolutely right. You can get out. That's the easy part. Southern California in particular is really bad because there's not a lot between Southern California and half of the country, for lack of putting it a better way. So if I say I want to leave Southern California and go to Phoenix, it's very difficult to find something coming back that pays worthwhile. And so for my time and effort, you have to go further. And so for me, if I wanted to be back in a week, the furthest east I could go would be Memphis, and then I'd have to find something coming back. Well, from Memphis coming back to Southern California, that was usually when I was coming home. That was the cheapest part of my trip. So again, a 1 week out is difficult. It's hard on the family, it's hard on everything to go longer, but what you have to do is get into the good market, run around in the good market, and then come home at a sacrifice rate. That's the nature of it. So you have to stay out longer. There's no two ways about it. Even other YouTubers that say they're making great money on box trucks, you'll notice most of them are not home every night. Some markets can support that, but most cannot. And so being home every other week because they have family obligation kind of means one of them should have gone out by themselves and stayed out maybe 3 weeks and then come home and taken the other partner out on a 1 week jaunt and come back. But doing it this way is difficult at best. It's way too many bills that come to work 50% of the time, especially in the market we're in today. This year, the rates are a fraction of what they were last year. There's no way you can survive at 50% effort.
Gotcha. Okay, so being said, the 5 to 7 days is kind of a red flag on that,
Right.
Because that means throughout a month you're only able to stay out 2 weeks on general, and it's not 2 consecutive weeks. It's
Correct.
week on, week off, week on, week off.
And that was self-induced. So that's
No, I understand. No. What we're trying to do today is just let people know what happened. So,
Right.
And then throw the flags out where you see them. All right. So you're in. You're doing a week on, week off. Now, what things did you find that worked well for you?
We really enjoyed doing. So I wrote down about one of our trips in particular. We picked up a full load, so we had 18 industrial HVAC units, and they had 3 drops in PA, in Pennsylvania, and 1 drop in Long Island, New York. And Mrs. Planner here, we really enjoyed being able to plan our stops and how far we were going to drive each day. We even planned in our 36-hour reset in Pennsylvania.
In conjunction with football.
In conjunction with, we had to stop and watch football on Sunday.
Oh, gotcha.
And so
it just planned out perfectly with that.
And we had a lot of fun and we enjoyed it. And that was the reason that we joined, was to drive around and see the country and not be
making money at the same time. But there was bit of freedom in being able to plan that one out instead of like your last minute, I got this, now I got to get on the road, I got to get there, and blah, blah, blah. This was a more planned out trip, and it was probably our favorite.
Yeah.
Aside from the Jenga we had to play of the 18 units in the back. But it was, for us, that was enjoyable. We loved being on the road. We loved being on the road together. There was nothing an issue with that. You better like your person that you're going to be on the road with if you're doing team, by the way. Something else we did that I thought was fun was I made it a game on how much money can we save. So I would pack a cooler, and I'm your side coach cook right here. I'm making the meals next while we're driving, and just being able to, I don't know, it was just, that part was fun to me.
Right.
All right. So again, this is a business, and the gentleman asked them what worked for them. Guys, if you were to ask me, back when we were doing oil field, what worked for me, my answer would be, when there's a shortage of trucks and your drilling rigs are paying $900 a load to go 2 miles, and they're providing the water, and you could do 10 loads a day, that worked for me, guys. If my response was, I used to like it when I'd take the company man out for beers, that was part of the job too, because you had to win them over. But they got asked what worked for them, and they brought up a trip that they took, and they did a reset, and apparently stayed at a hotel, and then they deadheaded back to Ohio, because if you listen to the previous part where they said the furthest they deadheaded was from Long Island, so they took a load out of where they, close to home, I imagine, and it was a trip they planned. They went to Pittsburgh, they went and watched football, they went to Long Island, and then they deadheaded all the way back to Ohio to grab a load going home. And they did a reset in the process and spent money. So let's stop and think about that for a minute. You're allowed 70 hours to run. If you're running teams, you can do 140. So somehow they were out for a week, ran out of hours, did a reset in the field, and came home. And for all of that expense, they did a week's worth of work. But that was their favorite trip. And so that, to me, again, doesn't ring like people that are business-minded. She says, they played a game on how much money they could save. Guys, that's not a game. You've seen in my videos, I go grocery shopping, I pack the truck full of food, and I've shown I cook on the road. Even now as a company driver with my co-driver, we go to the store together before we leave. We pack up and we split the tab on the on the food, and we cook on the road and try and avoid as much as we can, truck stop food. A, it costs you money, and B, it's expensive. And so this kind of, I get the part where they wanted to travel and spend time together and all that. There were multiple times when, especially when I was doing long haul, I would phone home and I would tell the family, yeah, it's beautiful here. I kind of wish you guys were with me. That would be cool, having the family with you and seeing the country and everything else. That's the upside to driving. But at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a grind. And I think they took it like a hobby. I think more fitting would have been buy themselves an RV and go enjoy running around in the RV. At the end of the day, it may have cost them less money.
So, what didn't work out for you guys? What become a problem?
So what I found that made it the not enjoyable portion of it is the loads that we took where we basically had to keep the throttle at the firewall. For example, we picked up one load in Tulsa. We got it strapped, and then they said, oh, no, because they paid for 20 feet. They took up 40 feet. We called Adam. Adam said, nope. They're going to pay for 40 feet or they have to reconfigure it. So then we had to unstrap everything, reconfigure it. And the time that took, we lost another partial that we could have put on the trailer. And then we had to make it to the drop before the following day in the afternoon, where they were closed all weekend. We had to wait till Monday. Right. And with our red flag, which we've already pointed out,
which is self-induced again.
Self-induced, that wasn't going to work for us.
Gotcha.
That would have also meant 2 more days at a hotel, because you're staying at a hotel, waiting that time out. So, I mean, would it have washed? Probably. You would have spent money to stay in that area until Monday to drop. So,
Right.
Self-induced or not, you wanted to make it before that weekend.
Right.
One thing. Sorry.
So again, what was problematic? Someone took up 40 feet on my truck when they paid for 20, and then I had to unstrap. This goes back to the you don't know what you don't know. Guys, if you're running a flatbed and the paperwork says 20 feet and they take 40 foot of your 40-foot trailer, you don't strap that load down. When you show up, you tell the forklift operator you have from here to here because you need to balance the load. You tell them where you want it. You don't let them load your whole trailer, strap it down, and then call your dispatcher to say, hey, there's something wrong. That's where experience comes in. Had one of the two of them taken a job driving somewhere, a lot of this would have revealed itself when they were on someone else's dime. And so, then he says he had to drive, full speed ahead. Again, I think that goes back to who knows how their truck was configured. My OTR trucks could push 77 miles an hour, and I was pushing barely over 1,500 RPM, and the engine can run as fast as 2,100 RPM. So I was nowhere near, the pedal to the floorboard in order to run 77. And honestly, I would only run 77 when there was a bonus or, picking up this load, dropping this load off at this time on Wednesday means I can book another load that pays really well. And so the two loads combined pay for the additional fuel. Otherwise, you run slower to save fuel. There's just a lot of lack of industry knowledge and hands-on experience.
Right.
Good, no, great.
Another thing that I think was for me on the compliance side of the house, compliance was fine. The self-initiated restrictions from the industry, from the brokers, that for me was probably our number one problem.
Where you had to have so much age and so many inspections under your belt.
The fact that they kept moving that goalpost.
Right.
Each time we felt like we hit that mark, they would move it again. And I don't know if that's the industry trying to weed out the small guys because the big guys want to get $2.50 a mile and they're sick of little guys saying, I'll do it for $2, because that does cut into the big guy's dollar, and the broker obviously wants the $2.50 because the broker gets a cut of that. So I don't know.
Okay. That statement, honestly, is the reason I decided to make this particular video. Her husband has a degree in logistics. They both claim to have a background in logistics. Back the video up and listen to what she just said. The brokers are trying to squeeze out the little guy because they want the people that are going to charge $2.50 a mile instead of $2 a mile because they get a bigger commission. Guys, that is not how this works. The broker books the load at, let's just say, $3.50. If a bigger company wants to do it for $2.50 and a smaller company wants to do it for $2, let's think about that for just a second. I'm the broker. I got the shipper paying me $3.50. I now need to pay a carrier to transport it. Do I want a bigger carrier at $2.50 or do I want a smaller carrier at $2? Her understanding of this is incorrect. And so, on top of the fact that they don't want to work full time, they think this is a part-time gig, which trucking is not. On top of the fact that they misinterpreted the demand in their own market, and on top of the fact that I think they bought the wrong truck for their application, their fundamental understanding of which way the money flows is skewed. Any business you get into, you have to understand who has the money, how it flows, and what's the best way to put yourself in the middle where no one else gets in front of line on you. That is, in any business, you can open a lemonade stand on the street corner. And if you don't understand, how do I get people to come in here and buy my lemonade so that I can cover the lemons, the water, and the sugar, and the ice that I purchased for today? If you don't have that basic fundamental understanding, you're gonna fail. There's no two ways about it. You will fail, and you're not gonna understand why. And so, at the end of the day, if she misspoke, then she misspoke. And I get it, because even when I make videos, sometimes I go back and I watch it and I'm like, oh, why did I say that? And there's a couple videos I've taken down because I catch myself later, or I record it and in the process of editing, I realize, oh, no, that's not what I meant to say. It happens. But she makes it sound like she thinks brokers get a percentage based on what you charge. That's a dispatcher. A dispatcher charges you a percent. And so if you get a $5 a mile load versus a $3 a mile load, the dispatcher makes more money. And so I'm taken aback, honestly. And this statement is kind of why I decided to take the time and comment on this video.
Where their mindset is, if it's a flooded industry right now, and if we just got in at the wrong time, I don't know why they're doing it. Well, it could always be said it's safety, but if you're not getting any loads and getting out on the road, how are you ever going to learn how to be safe? And I couldn't get us a safety inspection to save my life.
Let me interject this one thing. There's a video I put out a little bit ago. It's called Why They Keep Moving. And it really all revolves around, now that the Supreme Court refused to hear that C.H. Robinson case, now the brokers are actually on the hook for these guys who either have no inspections or are young. And that's just what that's all about. It can't get any more simple than that. As soon as they went on the hook, no, they kept moving it up. They just kept moving it up. So,
and the safety inspection thing was very, very frustrating. I mean, we drove here to New York and back, here to Ohio and back, and we'd even gone as far as we have pre-pass, or we had pre-pass. We got bypassed at way stations, and we pulled into them because we saw DOT officers there. And we're like, well, if they see our MC number,
they're going to have to.
We're a must inspect because we've never had an inspection. Nope, they just flat waved us through.
Okay, so this is about the halfway point on the video. I'm going to comment on this, end it, and then I'll do a second half later. So two things, again, like every 2 or 3 sentences, they bring up a lot of points that are topics for a video by themselves. And so the C.H. Robinson thing, what has happened, and it wasn't this way before, but it's becoming a thing now. So the C.H. Robinson deal is C.H. Robinson is a broker. They're a non-asset broker. What that means is they don't have trucks, and they assign loads to carriers. So a carrier was involved in a pretty serious accident where um, the insurance that the company has is not enough. So we had an at fault accident back in like 2014. It involved three trucks, and you wouldn't think so, but three trucks in that accident equaled $892,000. That was strictly property damage. That does not include, fatalities or people suing you or anything like that. That was straight up property damage. Back in 14. Now imagine with how expensive trucks are. So what is happening is when these bigger wrecks happen and a carrier, involves multiple other vehicles and there's injuries, and now you've got two or three families coming after you to sue you for the wreck, $1 million doesn't go very far. In the oil field, we were required to have $1 million commercial auto liability, $2 million general liability, and either a $5 or a $10 million umbrella. That does not include our workman's comp, our pollution, long-term legal liability, contractor's liability, or downhole insurance. And so, yes, for us in the oil field, insurance is huge, but to be a carrier, you're only required to have 750,000 to establish your authority. I did a video recently on how to age your authority on the cheap. Most brokers now require, well, they always have, they want you to have $1 million in general liability and about 100,000 in cargo. And so the scenario now is brokers are wanting you to have 6 months active authority and a minimum of 2 inspections. Oh, by the way, there's also a lawsuit right now against Amazon, one of Amazon's carriers, brand new carrier, couple months old, had a bad fatality, and it involves three different families, and now they are suing Amazon as the broker. So this probably lends itself to why Amazon is now double checking that the vehicles coming to the gate are actually yours and you didn't third party it out. Anyway, and so what they're mentioning about not being able to get an inspection, again, that goes back to not having any experience. By that, I mean time behind the wheel. So the gentleman states, well, we had a pre-pass and it would bypass. Well, that's what a pre-pass does. If you don't have any open violations, if you don't have any out of services, a pre-pass is going to keep you moving. That's why we pay the $30 a month fee to have pre-pass, so we don't have to stop. Anyway, if you need inspections, what you do to get an inspection is you pull in. You don't wait for them to stop you. So if you're pulling through the scale and there's scales there and you see the barn and the doors are open, once you go past the scale, usually there's a point where you can turn right and flip a U-turn and it brings you back around. Pull into the barn. That's how difficult it is. You pull in, you jump out, and they might look at you a little funny because they didn't pull you in, and you say, hey, I need my CSA score to show a level 1. Do you got time to do one for me? 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, why not? And you get your inspection done. So this thing where they say we couldn't get a level 1 inspection, again, if you've been doing this for any period of time, or if you had any real industry knowledge, you would know you just pull in. It's literally that hard. Pull in if someone's there and say, can someone inspect my truck? And at the end of the day, they're saying that's one of the biggest reasons why they failed is they kept moving the goalpost on them, so to speak. Um, that's not a difficult thing to get around. It's very simple. Their biggest problem was they needed to work. They needed to get out and stay out and not run, a week on, a week off, and do a week on and then do a 34-hour reset where you stay in hotels. Guys, when I was over the road, very rarely did I stay in a hotel. I want to say in a year that I was over the road, I may have booked 5 nights in a hotel. The rest of the time, it was in the truck. You shower at the truck stop, you make food in the truck, you're out there to make money. You're not on a vacation. And honestly, I think it was their idea that this would be like a rolling vacation that we could make money at. Anyways, like I say, this is halfway through the video. I'll go ahead and cut it off here and I'll do the rest of it. This is a lot of lessons learned. There's more on the tail end of the video. They encountered so many things that I felt this was a really good learning moment for my viewers. That's why I'm making this particular video. I'll be uploading it hopefully later today. If I don't get the second half done before Christmas, everyone have a Merry Christmas. And as always, thanks for watching.